Hello and welcome to The Stack, another exciting show ahead. We'll review Monocle's new companion book, plus the co-founder of WeTransfer tell us about his new print products, David Shaftel on the new issue of Open Tennis, and an art installation celebrating 25 years of 032C and Telekom Electronic Beats. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We start the show welcoming to the studio Damian Bradfield, known as the co-founder of WeTransfer. But now, since he left the company, he's leading FUP, self-described as the world's smallest entertainment company. Damian also wrote together with Andreas Tzortzis Not a Playbook, telling us a bit more about the story of WeTransfer and how brands can grow without sacrificing integrity. Besides the book, Damian discusses also his new illustrated storybook for young adults, Caro Kerouac. Here is Damian with more.
When we started the company, we ran into something because we felt there was a need. And I think an awful lot of business success is often wrapped up in just being in the right place at the right time. So 2009, Obama was in power. The internet was very exciting. People were really interested in discovering new tools and playing online. And we just happened to be in the right place at the right time with something that was obviously needed. And I felt like since the company started, we did a really good job at building a brand and working with creatives and understanding our audience was the creative market. And we highlighted our users, our customers, really, in the background images that we always had on WeTransfer that rotated. What we never really did was create a brand book or document the things that we were doing very well. We just moved from one project to the next project and serendipitously had a lot of luck on that journey. In the process, we had a model which was that we made money from subscriptions and advertising, but we donated 30% of all of our advertising to support artists. We then later set up a foundation to support emerging artists and a platform in WePresent that really highlighted the best of the art world or the design world, whatever it was. I grew up in a period when I was very critical of myself and concerned with the notion of selling out. I never wanted to talk too much about why we did things or how we did it or the success formula or anything else. It just felt too cliched, perhaps. But we had a conversation very late in the timeline of WeTransfer with a young artist, a DJ, and he was almost angry in saying that we had a responsibility to actually guide brands to be better and that we'd done it well, but because we hadn't communicated it, we'd actually done the artists a disservice. And I'd never seen it that way. And I think also because the market had changed, the way that artists and brands have a relationship has also changed. And as the company was sold, I felt like we needed to document what we had done well and try to put down some of the things and some of the structure and formula and stuff to guide others to do it. And perhaps it's too late. Perhaps we should have done it 10 years ago. But the intention of this book was to really lay out the guiding principles of what made WeTransfer good and great and why people loved it, so that perhaps others could do the same or copy it to some degree.
And in a way, it's in the title, it's not a playbook as well, because I don't think WeTransfer played by the rules of necessarily for a tech company in a way, right?
Yeah.
Even your connection with creatives, it felt very organic and real from the beginning, no?
Yeah, well, thank you. That was the intention. And it is the thing that made us most excited that, in all honesty, file sharing is not a particularly exciting business to be in. But the formula or the mechanic that we created was really exciting because by defaulting to not having banner advertising but having these huge full-screen ads, we could really showcase the work in the best possible light on the internet. And creatives loved that. And the energy that we got from taking someone that we knew was either short of visibility or short of money and being able to put a spotlight on them gave us a huge sense of reward that we played an important role, I think, in their lives to some degree in helping them further their career And for me personally, I get the most energy from that. That's the thing that I really loved about what we had.
There's a great quote in the book, a design free of distraction, not free of inspiration.
Yeah.
That's quite a good one that could define WeTransfer, right?
Yeah, I had an interview recently and I was asked what my favorite website was. And I couldn't name one. And that was so different to 2009 when I think we all, if you're old enough to remember, I think back then we all had a lot of favorite places to go and hang out and to read and be inspired on the internet. And they've slowly vanished as the Playbook has come into play. And people have become so much more formulaic in just copying other people. We were really fixated on just trying to make it beautiful. And to emphasize, we were a bunch of design-driven people, not engineers. So again, by fortune, we were in this place where we really understood what good looked like, and an awful lot of engineers didn't back then. So our competition was sparse. There was not a lot of beautiful websites at that time. So we really, really stood out. I think we also helped over time, create a better internet. I really think that we helped push other engineering-driven companies to behave and think and look better and different.
Well, and let's go back to Not a Playbook. That book was made in partnership with Andreas Sources, right? So tell us, how did he contribute with this? Because for you, it was a personal story. You knew everything, but how did Andreas got into that project?
So I've known Andreas quite a long time, and he actually used to work for you guys.
Yes.
I think he's got very good taste. He's a good writer. He's a good journalist. And we'd written something together, a white paper, when I used to live in LA and he was in San Francisco. So we worked on something probably 2019, I can't remember exactly. And we just had a good relationship. And as a journalist, he's quite good at asking the right questions and just extracting information. Mm-hmm. And what I have been bad at is documenting process, documenting decision-making. And I started on Not a Playbook on my own. I started writing this book that I wanted to put out as to why I believed WeTransfer was interesting or why it had the reputation that it did. But I just found it a little bit self-aggrandizing and, I'm riddled with doubt. So at a certain point, didn't believe in it myself. And I spoke to Andreas and he said, well, we could do it in the form of a conversation. And basically, I'll talk with you, we'll extract the information and then try to sort of post-rationalize the process. And it was really useful. It was, for me, honestly, somewhat therapeutic. But it was a really nice process of me saying what we had done and then him asking questions as to, okay, well, how did you get there? Why did this relationship make sense to you? How did you make that decision to commission a film or do X project or Y project? And then in that conversation, we basically realized there was a lot of common themes and then started putting them into the themes of the book, which I hope make a lot more sense than perhaps my rambled scribblings would have done if I'd done it on my own.
And that's the thing about the book. It's not rambly at all, if I can say. It's quite clear. There's a clear language. I think even, let's say, if you are a potential entrepreneur, you want to open your own business or your own brand, I think that's kind of the book you have to read without being a boring self-help book or something like that, you know?
Yeah, and it's deliberately small. It's not a big book. It's deliberately pocket-sized. I wanted it to be something that ideally you would make notes in, you would scribble in it. You can put it in your pocket and take it on the tube and read it on your way home. And I think a lot of people quite like the idea of bragging that they read it fast. So people would tell me, I bought your book yesterday, I finished it tonight, I loved it. It's like, okay, I'm very glad that you could digest it that quickly because attention span's a thing, right? I mean, people don't want to spend hours. I mean, some do. A lot of people don't want to spend hours reading something. And I also think the business book market is one that has become quite formulaic again. And, there's an awful lot of books out there about how I made it, how I did this, how we went from, nothing to something. And I don't know that that's particularly helpful. And the intention of this book is to be helpful for people that are working in branding, in marketing, that are building something. Also to make them understand that a brand is nothing without good people. And the only reason WeTransfer is what it is because we were fortunate enough to have a good bunch of people around that wanted to do something differently and to ask the right question and to challenge things. And I would always say I'm not afraid of being fired. I think we should try to push it as far as we can because then I know that if I'm uncomfortable, if I've got a feeling that this might be, bad or outrageous or really wrong, then at least I know that we're doing something different. If it all feels too safe, I don't think you're going to build anything interesting.
Absolutely. Damian, I would like to talk about another one of your projects, this beautiful kind of, is it a teenage book, if I can say that, or Caro Walk?
Yeah, it's aimed at 10 to 12-year-olds. But my intention with the book is to create something that I would like to think that parents would love to read to their kids. I always enjoyed reading to my kids this book series from Clarissa Claudwell. How to Train a Dragon is just the most fun series of books to read with kids. And it's so well written that I can chuckle away at things myself that perhaps my kids might not understand, but they see the bigger themes and they understand the characters and everything else. So it's sort of an adventure story. And I always had that with Roald Dahl's books. I loved reading them as a kid. The pictures, the illustrations took you somewhere, otherworldly. And I worked with this amazing illustrator called Luis Mendo on Caro, and I really think he captured the essence of what it was that I was trying to convey. And it's about a young girl who grows up in San Francisco in the 50s and 60s. She's raised by terrible parents who have supposedly a lot of money, but they certainly don't have a lot of love for her. And they are unkind to an abnormal degree and push her to ultimately leave and try to prove herself to them by making a lot of money. And she manages to discover on this journey that actually the money doesn't make her happy, that not having any friends, not having any human connection really isn't fulfilling. And she's fortunate enough that she discovers a moral compass which takes her, in the right direction in life. A lot of stuff that I've done like this is based around my experiences with the tech industry. This is very much based on Elon Musk. It is about what I think is one of the most intrinsic issues that Elon has, and that I don't believe that his family showed him the support and the love that he needed. And I think he's desperate still to try to prove it to somebody. And I think it's dangerous. I really think we're seeing somebody who's incredibly dangerous at the moment with incredible amount of power who is lost. I think it's sad. I've done quite a few projects like this over time where I try to explain and show how there's a misuse of power and a misuse of wealth, and that I think... Megalomaniacs, exactly. And I, at a certain point, thought, okay, it's probably too late for us, but maybe for a younger generation, it's not too late. And maybe this could help a younger individual see that there's a better way of being successful, or understanding what relationships mean and how the importance of relationships. So the book, I think, is, in my opinion, beautiful.
It is.
Printed in Japan. It's on Japanese papers. But we also made a record, so there's an audio version of it, which is on vinyl. And I was very lucky that Stephen Fry plays one of the characters, and Geraldine James, a whole bunch of people, including music from Sire Gray. And it's my dream is that somebody has a record player at home, they can play the record, listen to an audiobook, look at the pictures, the phone is away, they're not being distracted, and they're just transported to another world that hopefully is fun and educational at the same time.
And, just looking ahead, with your publishing company, how do you see? Are you excited? Are there any other projects in the line now?
Yeah, so I have two other projects that they're very early stages, so I won't share them, only that you never know how these projects turn out. But yeah, I would like to use Foop as a vehicle really for storytelling. It doesn't have to be printed matter. It could be audio, it could be visual.
Be a magazine.
Could be a magazine. Yeah, no, I'm actually having quite a few magazine discussions at the moment. I just see it really as a beautiful collaboration vehicle. So something that I would like to think that, it could help fuel an idea very much like we did with WeTransfer and WePresent, just really in more tactile form.
Thank you, Damian. And for more information on Foop, go to foop.wtf and damianbradfield.com. And as Wimbledon gets ready for the big final for women's and men's this weekend, it's time to talk tennis again here on The Stack. So a pleasure to welcome David Shaftel from Open Tennis Magazine. Their second issue is just out now. To tell us more, here is David.
It's very nice to have the second issue out and have more than one magazine. I forget that I can still give people the first one, and, I think it's evergreen, and now we have two. So it was great to build on that, and great to just see what the magazine wants to be. it's a process of making a magazine, and you have ideas of what you want to be in it and the things you want to cover and what you want it to look like. And then it sort of also has a mind of its own, and you start to realize what fits and what doesn't fit, and what, in this case, is an open tennis story and what isn't. So that will reveal itself with each issue. So to get further down that path is great. I think the second issue is quite good, if I can say so, and just sort of avoided a sort of sophomore slump. I think we actually improved on the first issue in some ways, although you're always very fond of a launch. I love those covers. I feel like one thing I'm very happy about is there was 2 covers on the launch issue, and they're both, have a chance to become iconic if we keep going. So I was really pleased to set the tone with those covers on the first issue. But I also wanted to set this up as something that can evolve and also get better, and in this case, bigger. So we've added 24 pages, most of which is an actual front of the book, something I've never done before. And it's perfect bound instead of saddle stitched or stapled like the last one. So, the first issue, we were at the very outer limits of what a staple could go through. So, I knew I wanted it bigger, and it's great to be perfect bound. It just feels more substantial and permanent. Of course, it's not permanent. It's a publication. I think that's important, that it is I hope people collect them, but it is a temporary thing, which is great, because if there's something I'm not satisfied with or I want to improve it, as soon as you're done, you get another chance to improve, fix things, keep standards up, that kind of thing.
And also you wrote beautifully in your editorial kind of letter. And then you were talking about what is an open tennis story. But then you kind of found a theme for the second issue, which is tennis as a symbol of belonging, upward mobility, which is quite interesting, right? Which I think it is very much the case of tennis these days, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it is changing in terms of like the inclusivity and participation in tennis. But yeah, that theme is, again, these are some things that evolve. You bring the material in and you realize, these themes present themselves to you. And then you realize, maybe subconsciously you were seeking these things out, as I think I was. But that is also part of the process, to get everything in and see how it all fits together. But that's a topic that's always been interesting to me is, when I was a kid, I played American football. That was the big thing in my household, and baseball being America.
So not tennis,
and all of that. But I did start playing tennis mainly because, we were in this big tennis boom in America and in the world. But, my mother found it respectable. She was not a particularly sporty person, and she liked the fact that you had to wear a shirt with a collar. And in those days, you were dressed in all white. So even then, my involvement was sort of built around supposed respectability and upward mobility, and a more quote unquote civilized sport than football, for example. So, but I do think tennis has always had that aspirational feel to it. Again, I think it's changing, but that's a big part of how this has historically been perceived on the recreational and participatory level.
And flicking through the new issue, always a standout. I think the fashion shoots were really great. It felt very sexy, new, and quite special. One of the highlights for sure.
Oh, thanks. Well, that's nice to hear. That's something I'm muddling through. I wanted with this magazine to do more fashion. In the past, the previous magazine, I had a lot of documentary style photography, no lights, not so many stylists, people's own clothes, that kind of thing, which was a reflection of my style, but also budgetary constraints. But I wanted this magazine to be different, and I wanted to get involved with fashion and fashion shoots. So since it's not my specific background, I have to trust, I have to hire the right people that I trust and let them execute.
And, looking at the website, besides, of course, the magazine, you kind of have a lot of fun stuff there. You did some special zines, some fashion. I can see you're wearing, actually. Beautiful. I love this tone of green from the open tennis T-shirt. How important are those kind of extra little projects for the brand?
I think really important. I mean, you touched on 2 things. There's the shirt that I'm wearing and things that we can make and sell. And I want those things, I wanted to make a T-shirt or a shirt, not merch. I don't want to make, slap the brand on anything and just, again, just try to make merch. I want to make nice things, and I hope in the future we do some things that are a bit off-piste, not just T-shirts and hats and specifically tennis-related things. And the zines, this is something we love to do.
The Rosalia-inspired one. Right?
Oh, the Alessia. Yeah. So one of the reasons I'm here is we've done a project with the Italian sportswear brand Alessia, and we made a 24-page newspaper for them, celebrating their archive and sort of telling the history of the brand in a sideways way. It's not point A to Z story of the brand. We played around with their archive and graphic design and things like that. So that's a big part of our business. We love publishing things and we love printing things. But we've also done newspapers and zines in between our regular magazine publication schedule. This magazine is twice a year. So, for example, we want to have something current for the U.S. Open. So we'll do another 24-page newspaper of original content around the U.S. Open.
And how will you distribute that, by the way, those more specific
projects? So what's great about printing on newsprint is that it's pretty cheap. We don't need to sell them. We can give them away. People really love to have something in their hand. So we have a few different events and parties around the U.S. Open. We'll have them there. We'll probably have a street team hand some out on the subway platform on the way to the U.S. Open. A few newsstands we work with will say, you can go get them here and there. But they're so fast moving and you can put them anywhere and give someone a stack of them really easily. I know you guys are big proponents of the newspaper, and it's looking at one right now, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't inspired by them. But it's a great, cheap thing to do that looks great. You get to showcase graphic design, and like I said, people like to have something in their hand, helps connect them with the brand, keep it in their head.
I have a question about tennis in general. We're talking about upward mobility, sense of belonging. Do you feel there is a change of guard at the moment happening, even in the big competitions like Wimbledon here in London, US Open? The winners are changing. They're younger. I feel that this year, I don't know, what's your take on that after years of the same kind of guys winning all the time?
Yeah, it's funny. We talk about this a lot. You have, on the men's side, the two best players in the game, Sinner and Alcaraz. And we kind of went into that generation right from Federer, Nadal, Djokovic. So there was quite a few generations of tennis players who were orphaned kind of as a result of all this dominance. And I think the people that are going to challenge those two on the men's side are going to be younger, are 16, 17 years old right now. So we'll see. Men's tennis is in major flux. And everyone was kind of scared what was going to happen when Djokovic and Federer and Nadal retired, and is the interest in the sport going to go away? And it hasn't. And that's really just so heartening. A lot of interesting, exciting stories on the women's side as well. It's a bit more wide open. So, I kind of feel like I can guess who's going to be in the Wimbledon final on the men's side, but on the WTA side, like kind of anything could happen, which I find really exciting because for so many years, on both sides, there was sort of like you could pencil a few people into the final, and now it feels wide open. So I think that's exciting on the women's side.
And finally, I just want to ask you, we did discuss the fashion shoots, but tell me some of your highlights from the second issue. I love as well the piece on the left-handed. I'm left-handed, so, good on us.
Well, great. I love that. I love that piece too. The writer is really smart, as you probably gleaned from that piece. And it was sort of an homage to Nadal, who has recently retired, who was the big lefty on campus. But it's just a sort of rumination on how lefties sow chaos. I think that's the subhead. And I really also am quite fond of the illustration in that it was done by Rodrigo Corral, who's sort of the best book cover designer working today. I think in America anyway, if you see a great cover, I feel it's made by Rodrigo or someone ripping off Rodrigo. So I was really pleased that he made beautiful sculpture, I think, for that. And I'm also quite fond of, we have a shoot by Jasko Bertoli, who's a Swiss photographer living in Paris, who went to a tennis club in Ferrara where the Italian writer Giorgio Bassani was club champion, and sort of used his experiences to inform the book and film The Garden of the Finzi Contini, which is just a lovely book and sort of the ultimate book as tennis is a metaphor for belonging. So I love the shoot. I love Bassani. I love the book. I love everything about it.
Thank you, David. And for more information how to get hold of Issue 2, go to thesecondserve.com. And now a pleasure to speak with Harry Nuriev, founder of Crosby Studios, one of the coolest and most renowned architects at the moment, with close ties to the music scene. For his latest project in Berlin called All is Sound, he wanted to bring back the 2000 aesthetics and also celebrate 25 years of 032C and Telekom Electronic Beats. Here is Harry with more.
For the Berlin project, it was a second project with Electronic Beats, and also we've done a few things before with 032C. All together we kind of became a family, which is great. I was really focusing on create something that will force you put your phone down and kind of get back at this time where we were just love spending time with each other and being present. I don't remember myself when last time I had just a jam with music without using my phone. And it's interesting that all essential life experience now comes from our gadget. It wasn't the main point to disconnect with the phone, but one of the important part of music, I guess, it's in a certain way to be connected through not only your inner pain or your voice, but also to be present. When we start out to work on this project, we were introduced to a certain inventory of CD, which is very interesting because, in your day-to-day playlist, you can look for any music, you can find anything you want. But when it comes to CD, we were really limited and dominated by a certain era and context. We were in Berlin, so we kind of were around things that was available at the moment. And one way it's limiting you to work with a certain number of songs or albums, but from other side, it's very interesting because you can get closer to some cultural choices based on where you are at the moment. So you can't just pull up any album you want. I find it's quite interesting. So limiting choice is almost a luxury in an industry right now. And this explosive availability to every single thing come in as a negative element because you don't really appreciate things that much anymore. And also you tend to forget many things and many songs because you're always kind of like on a surface of things that surround you. Let's say you walk in a room or a coffee shop, or you just had some nostalgia and you Shazam some music, or some of your friend mentioned some song, or it's in a movie. So basically your environment dictate you what do you want to listen, what you're going to listen. But when it comes to working with a library inventory, that you're really limited just by the inventory, which I found very fascinating. And it was interesting, almost like a sociological research for me, because I'm sure if I'll repeat the same exhibition in Paris or, I don't know, in New York, I will work with completely different material. I think it's essential for Berlin, certain style of music and appreciation of CD. I think it was very natural. That's what was the most interesting, unexpected part of the project.
And it's interesting, of course, there's an element of nostalgia, but I have to say it feels very current as well, because I think people are looking for that. Even when it comes to music, that kind of connection with the physical. As you rightly said, sometimes you Shazam a song, but it kind of, it just gets away with all the algorithms, all the digital. Sometimes having a CD, like an object, there's something that is more valued almost to it, don't you think?
Yeah, it's like a pressure thing. It's like when you go to a museum and you can only see a certain work that available because some work on restoration at the moment, some work can travel, and some work get lost for the time, or they're maybe not well preserved, so you can't really fully see only pieces of it. So we're talking about almost like archaeological experience in music, which for me is weird because I was just collecting these CDs and there were, I discover new albums and it was my daily routine, where now it's a dinosaur. To live through this time shift is almost like a bit scary. So I really want to capture these feelings in my work, if it makes sense.
And this is also a celebration of two kind of media companies that are celebrating 25 years, which is 032C, of course, and Telekom Electronic Beats. Did they invite you for the project? How actually did it work? Because I'm sure you knew those brands and you had some sort of relationship before the installation. So tell us a bit more about that.
So Electronic Beats, they became a family. It's our second project, and we had major fun during Art Berlin and last year in 2024. And they support my exhibition. We were thinking to do something for 25 years anniversary last year, and I pitched the idea to find out like a more literal way of talking about music. I really want to do something for them because my anniversary, I just turned 10 years anniversary with Crosby Studios last year, so I understand how important is this round number, as well as 032C, as we also became family. And Berlin is kind of like my art home, I will say, after Paris. So I really inspired by the culture, by everything from texture, color to philosophy to street style. I guess many artists are. Also, Maria, one of the two founder of 032C, she created a beautiful capsule collection to celebrate both of the anniversaries, which is also connected to music. I believe the name of it is White Noise, which is related to some of the Prodigy video that she was part of. So it was very immersive, very complex in a good way collaboration, which has many layers. But most importantly, it's all about music and our friendship.
I love that. You did mention the word Paris, so it's been a very good year for you as well. Now you have a permanent kind of gallery space in the city as well, right? So which is super exciting because I feel that Paris, their creative scene is booming this year. I don't know, Monocle is also just open in Paris. There's something going on in the city.
It's true, and I think that the main tendencies, the science of tendency, is kind of like laying to the idea of the main culture hub started, I guess, right after COVID, which is 2021. That's the time when we were considered to move to Paris. And since then, I never look back. And it's really I can say every year, it's really every month, there's something happening in the city, transforming. You can see this, some street in same condition twice. So every day, something's moving, something changing. And I kind of captured the same moment in New York. So I know how to be immersed with blooming culture and blooming city. It's quite fascinating and really, really affecting your creative process. I feel really, really inspired by Paris, but mostly by people who shape Paris every day. So it's quite fascinating. And you mentioned our gallery. A month ago, I decided to risk and open permanent space in the same street where I live. And we have our atelier, Crosby Studios. It's right by École des Beaux-Arts, which is the most important school of fine art in France. And there is so much history in the street. You can recall things from Yves Klein, one of his first exhibition at the street, to go all the way to Queen Margot and Oscar Wilde, who live and died in the hotel across the street. So when you live in this environment, when you connect into such important moments in history of Paris and just in Europe in general, you feel so small. It's also a really humbling process, which I find very fascinating. Yeah, in this gallery, we don't have any curation schedule. It's really a place that, tomorrow we can decide to do something and we'll probably go for it. And then the week it's going to be something else. I think eventually we'll join some schedule and we will work in more proper pace that works according a gallery life. But so far, we just want to take it easy and invite all people that help and were part of our creative process in Paris. And then from them, we'll see.
Thank you, Harry. And the installation remains in 032C Workshop in Berlin until the 25th of July. And finally on the show, we talk about the 5th installment from Monocle's Companion series. This time the book uses the Venice Architecture Biennale as a springboard for 50 new essays, interviews and ideas from both 2025's Biennale exhibitors and the wider Monocle community. Here is Monocle's editor, Josh Fannett, with more.
This paperback format, I think, really lends itself to the bookworm in people. I mean, magazines appeal to people for different reasons, and the use of photography and colour is so important. But actually, when our creative director, Richard Spencer Powell, when Tyler Brulé, our founder, when Andrew and I discussed the very first one of these, we pitched it as being a bit like a paperback. It's a very restrained item. It's got a debossed cover with a couple of words on it. Inside, we've only ever used illustration and text. It's 50 essays, which brings me on to the title of this, our 5th companion, Fernando, 50 essays on architecture, design and building better. So you can see that while the other companions really flitted around between the idea of cities and living well, this actually is kind of tied for the first time to a place and an event. It's the Venice Biennale, which is on now.
But Josh, it's such a broad topic, architecture, and I have to say I did flick through. I read some amazing essays there. So it's actually, of course, the Biennale, was the main reason for us to do the book, but actually there are different topics from African architecture to air conditioning even.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fundamental thing that we get wrong in the world. We think of architecture as being a discipline that is undertaken by academic people wearing glasses and, monochrome clothes and walking around stroking their chin. Architecture is the way that we feel in space and buildings. It's the materials that surround us, and also it's the choices that people make when they're structuring our environment. It's the width of a street. It's allowing a breeze in. And given a blank flat plan and all of the talent that was on display at the Architecture Biennale, we decided to do a mix of stories. We decided to take some things that we thought were interesting ideas, to take some of the best examples of exhibitions at the show. And crucially, and I hope no one gets offended when I say this, we tried to get journalists to get what architects meant out of them, because it's a disciplinary problem. When architects, sometimes they're amazing at making you feel something in a space, maybe they're not so good at explaining what that means. And maybe a lot of people who have been putting together exhibitions like those at the Biennale, they're used to filling an A4 sheet of paper and telling you about what their exhibition is. They're not always amazing at telling you what it means for their life. So what we've really tried to do is tease out some of these stories. There's a great one by a Vietnamese architect who talks about making cities more spontaneous. So his exhibition is about this idea of ad hocism, so building bits of the city not as part of a master plan, but in little stages and through improvisation. That is quite a complex story. But, when I say to you, Fernando, should cities be more spontaneous? I think you'd say yes.
Absolutely.
So it's about taking these sometimes highfalutin, sometimes important, sometimes, very small observations and making them real. Toshin Oshinowo, a great Nigerian architect, talks about how the shape of the markets in Lagos, Nigeria's biggest city, they talk about the ingenuity of the people there, and they structure the environment for people to trade and upcycle in a way that she thinks the global north can learn from. So it's about an exchange of ideas. There's also some stuff about Venice itself, because as a city, it's incredible how many architectural innovations, artistic minds have settled on there for inspiration. And it's obviously a place where this grand event takes place too. So for the first time ever, I know you're interested in paper and formats. We've put in a 16-page gloss section, and we've asked one of our favourite photographers to do a kind of photo essay of Venice. And when I spoke to him, I said, don't give me the tourist Venice and don't give me the locals Venice. Give me something of what Venice means to you. And he's a great photographer, Andreas Pugiotto. He's picked some really wonderful images. I don't know if you've had a chance to look through.
Yes, I did. And actually, I was going to say that's a first as well. So there's been some kind of new developments and there's even spin-offs of the Monocle Companion now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Companion is...
The idea is great.
Yeah, it's a product. It's 50 essays about a thing, and it's pretty uncompromising. So one of the essays is, a kind of long read. It's about the philosophy of the home. I think it tops out at, 7,000, 8,000 words. And there are some little 500-worders about our creative director, Rich, who obviously designs everything that we do, wrote a nice essay about how having children has changed the way that he moves through cities and understands buildings. A, because everything's the wrong height for them, and B, because their enthusiasm for different things changes how he saw the cities he moved through with them. So there needs to be something personal, and there also needs to be, like Rich's children, something to draw you through a space and bring you through a city and make you see it just that little bit differently. Hey, Fernando, remember when normally I ask you a question?
Ask me.
What's your favourite essay, or what's your favourite thing about Venice? Or when you get this, what does it make you think about?
I think Venice is a magical city, and sometimes we forget about that because we read in the press about certain weddings or over tourism. But then we have to remember it's such a magical city. So it was great to read actually more about Venice, and I was very interested in the piece by Matthias Agbo about African architecture and the challenges as well, and how they're trying to make it modern, but sometimes they forget about perhaps the earlier architecture in the continent.
Yeah, a couple of architects and writers thought about this. There's this guy called Demas Norco as well, who wrote a great essay about thinking about architecture through your lifetime, not just thinking about the building and the 6-month build. And there were a lot of discussions about how African architecture is often, this monolith. Like, what is African architecture? What's European architecture? It's too broad a brushstroke to go for. So what Matthias is talking about is taking something that was suitable for a certain climate in a certain place and a certain material, and really bringing that into the architecture of that place at that time. There's a good piece in there as well about the cultural legacy of Lomé in Togo, and how unexpectedly this West African city that doesn't prides itself on having a tremendous amount of, spectacular global architecture actually has an incredible amount of modernist stock that's not really been celebrated. So some of it is about looking at what we build anew. Some of it's looking at and celebrating what we've already built.
And Josh, now a question back. What's your favorite essay? That's a controversial one.
So I can't pick a favorite, Fernando, but can I tell you the essay that I really wanted to commission that never happened, I'll have to do in a future one?
The Sixth Companion.
I desperately wanted to get Ed Stocker, our Milan correspondent, to find a fisherman in Venice and to talk about getting up every day and seeing this incredible view, this incredible city that's been captured by Canaletto and through the ages, but it just being part of your normal backdrop, and how his view would have been the same as a fisherman 250, 300 years ago. It really, I think, changes your perspective on architecture. So that'll be the hook for the next one.
Thank you, Josh. And the 5th edition of the Monocle Companion is out now. You can buy a copy on monocle.com. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks to our editor, Jack Jewers. Any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. And remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, subscribe to The Stack on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.